The story of the Denisovans has unfolded in small increments ever since the group was first discovered in 2010. But there's an undeniable drama to our emerging understanding of these people. Partly this is because they were entirely unknown to us prior to that time, their existence just now coming to light. But also, in a testament to the power of modern genetic resourcefulness, they've also become the first group in the genus Homo identified exclusively from genetic data, from the distal phalanx of a pinky bone in the floor of Denisova Cave in Siberia. Mitochondrial DNA still intact after lying on the floor of that cave for some 50 to 76,000 years. And that, in some sense, Denisovans continue on, as the genome in many human populations contain the genetic residuum of our departed cousins. Since that time, Denisovans have come to be regarded as the eastern cousins of the Neanderthals, who lived in the more western regions of Eurasia. The best assessment is that the ancestors of these two groups separated from each other some 400,000 years ago, whereas the ancestors of Homo sapiens appeared to have separated from the ancestors of Neanderthal and Denisovans some 700 to 800,000 years ago. A new ray of light now shines on one of the most pressing mysteries about the Denisovans in the form of what appears to be a Denisovan tooth, a molar, found recently in a cave in Laos. While Denisovan DNA is found to some degree in human populations throughout Eurasia, there is a somewhat higher percentage in Asia and in Native Americans, but by far the highest percentage of Denisovan DNA occurs in people living in parts of Oceania and Australia. How is it that Denisovans, whose remains at this juncture have been found only in two places, the Denisova Cave in Siberia and in the Xiahe mandible in a cave called by Xiahe Karst in Gansu province, China, on the Tibetan plateau, how could they have interbred with human beings thousands of miles away from these known Denisovan sites? The answer, as the Laos molar seems to indicate, supports the hypothesis that previously lacked material evidence. The range of Denisovan habitation had to be much wider than that of our meager array of Denisovan fossils, a pinky bone phalanx, a few teeth, some additional bone fragments, and the Xiahe mandible, and possibly numerous unconfirmed additional candidates from elsewhere in Asia. But somewhere along the route to places like New Guinea, Australia, and the Philippines, early Homo sapiens must have encountered Denisovans. Now at last we have found a fossil indicator of that encounter, or at least evidence that Denisovans did not only live in the cold and altitude that was not on the route to the South Pacific and Australasia. There were Denisovans in Southeast Asia, right along the path that humans had to take to get to the places where Denisovan DNA is most abundant. This doesn't mean that the groups met in Laos or even in Southeast Asia, but it does mean that, just as expected, Denisovans lived in a much wider geographical range. In fact, the new molar has been dated to between 131 and 164,000 years ago, long before our direct ancestors would have been in the area after their dispersal from Africa. Just to visualize what I'm describing, we don't know the exact route of dispersal from Africa, but in a rough way, just going to say out of Africa along the coastlines. The coastlines have changed. We don't know for sure, so this is just a rough schematic across the Indian Ocean, down through Southeast Asia, and then Oceania, Australia, and this is the area of the greatest amount of Denisovan DNA now. And here's where the Denisova Cave is, right up here. Here is the Denisovan jaw. And the cave in Laos is right here. So you see that this finding places Denisovans not thousands of miles away in Siberia, not on the Tibetan plateau, but right along the probable path that Homo sapiens had to take to get to Oceania, the Philippines, Australasia, and all the places where the evidence of interbreeding is highest. Let's talk about the discovery itself by Laura Shackelford and Fabrice Demete and colleagues in Laos. They explored Tamu Hau, and I'm giving that pronunciation my best shot, a limestone cave in the Annamite Mountains of Laos. They had been warned that cobras occupied the cave, but children told them that there were bones inside, so they decided to investigate. Inside, they found the fossil remains of various mammals, including ancestral bovines, deer, rhinoceros, monkeys, even an orangutan, the bones of which all appeared to have been chewed by porcupines. But within a breccia block, they recovered a lower molar from a species of the genus Homo. Unfortunately, no DNA was recovered from the bones of the other mammals found within the cave, probably due to the tropical conditions that do not preserve DNA well. And any DNA analysis of the tooth would have required destroying part of it, so that was not done. Paleoproteomic study. And if you want to understand that better, in this video I go over this method of analyzing ancient proteins that are still intact as a way of differentiating different ancient populations through their unique proteins. Paleoproteomic study could not determine to which group the owner of the molar belonged, other than that it was probably an uninterrupted tooth from a young girl between about 3 and 8 years of age. But the tooth is not Homo sapiens structurally, and it's way too old anyway, and a thorough array of morphological and comparative analyses of the tooth show the greatest similarities to lie with the molars of the Denisovan jaw from Xiahe. While they could not absolutely rule out that the tooth was Neanderthal, that possibility was less likely and would by far represent the easternmost example of a Neanderthal ever found. The authors carefully used the term, quote, the most parsimonious hypothesis to attribute the tooth to Denisovans. So it appears that the finding of this tooth in Laos, albeit long before our kind entered the region, places Denisovans in a new location in Asia, a location consistent with and which makes sense of the genetic signal of interbreeding seen most strongly in people of Oceania and Australasia. Amazing. It had to be the case. But finding material evidence of this represents new and groundbreaking information about Denisovan history and their interaction with human ancestors. A few other comments about the study and the response to it before some final words. First, this study was just published in Nature Communications, an open access, immediately available journal. And for this I am very grateful, as unlike many other journals, this allows someone like me to read and review the original study immediately, and to use materials, charts, photos, etc. from the article to communicate with them publicly. I look forward to the day when all scientific papers are similarly available. Second, the response within the paleoanthropology community has been very interesting. It's rare in my experience to see a new piece of research published and to have immediate wide support, rather than to have some scholars disagree and others to call for more study. But this paper came out and the response has been pretty uniform. Carl Zimmer had a really good article in the New York Times, and he quotes paleoanthropologist Xiahe Bailey, who was involved in the Tibetan jaw research but not part of the Laos tooth finding, as saying, I agree 100% with the analysis. Esteemed paleontologist John Hawkes of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who was involved in the Homo naledi finds in South Africa, reports the finding in his Twitter account saying, one hominid molar is similar in anatomy to molars in a Denisovan mandible from Xiahe, China, and he praises the Zimmer account. Perhaps the most careful comments that I've seen come from Chris Stringer, very experienced and well-known expert on recent human evolution, who praises the study and its importance, though he adds, at the moment I'd like to add the word putative to its attribution as Denisovan. His reason for that is that he still regards the Xiahe jaw as itself putatively and not absolutely definitively Denisovan. This is a very conservative point of view, which I guess is a respectable position for a scientist to hold. But he is nonetheless very excited about the finding. Note that he has previously said about the Denisovan jaw, although it's certainly very suggestive of a link with the Denisovans, I think I'd like to see bigger samples to really pin that down more. In this case, he wants to see more complete Denisovan fossils, or DNA or paleoproteomes from some of the other Chinese fossils. I linked all quotes and articles in the description. But when he says that he wants to see DNA or more paleoproteomes from the other Chinese fossils, he's alluding to another unsolved and provocative mystery, which is that there are numerous additional fossils from the rough period of the Denisovan time span, which are still not classified, and which could be Denisovan or not. These include the recent skull from Harbin, provisionally termed Homo longi, or Dragon Man. Is this the face of a Denisovan? Also the skull from Dali, and the Penghu mandible from off the coast of Taiwan, and at least half a dozen other interesting findings. Let us hope to integrate these important discoveries into our understanding of Middle Pleistocene paleoanthropology in China. But it is entirely possible that we already have other Denisovan fossils in our possession, but we have not yet been able to prove it. It is amazing that a people who were completely unknown not long ago, our close relations, who had a direct impact on human history that we retain in the record of our genes, have come back into the world to be known again. In a few short years, we know of their existence, we know of their genes, we know more and more of where they lived. Perhaps their skulls and thus their facial appearances are already in our possession, waiting for confirmation. Further discoveries will likely reveal more about their anatomy, their way of life, and maybe their cultural practices. After tens of thousands of years, they are not lost to history after all. Their genes live on within us, and much information about them has been conserved. The curiosity and ingenuity of human beings have brought back the Denisovans through our investigative work. It is an awesome tribute to our science, to our technology, and to human persistence that such a feat is possible during this moment when we are alive. Be sure to subscribe, hit the notification icon to hear about new videos, and thanks a lot for watching.